I got nothing. Hello everyone, I'm Father Aaron, and welcome to the Dungeon Minister! Okay, I was being serious there. I've got nothing. I've got no recap today. And I have no recap for you today because we haven't played the game. And we haven't played the game because I am not a smart person. Okay, see, I had it all ready. I had the stage all set. I had the bad guys all planned out. I'd even done some crafting to really make this a cool encounter. All I needed was some confined territory, some terrain that would funnel the characters down into a confined space. Once the recap comes out, you'll see why. But I needed to focus them into a narrow space, so I thought, I'm just going to do some cliffs. But what I decided was that I would use floral foam. Now, I wanted it because of its intrinsic qualities, for how easy it is to mush and mash, how easy it is to get a sort of pitted look. I wanted a volcanic look to this rock, so I thought, well, that would be what I want to use. And I picked up 4 bricks of it for dirt cheap at the dollar store, right? I thought, well, 4 bricks, that gives me quite a nice long area. I can do one on each side, nice narrow space, perfect, right? Well, yes, if floral foam was any good as a crafting material. It's not. At least it's not with the equipment and the setup and the approach I took, which was first to mash it into the shape I wanted, and next to paint it over with a sort of Mod Podge paint and water combo. Something that would soak into it and then dry nice and hard so that it wouldn't be so fragile, it wouldn't crumble, because, floral foam is crumbly, right? Well, it's also really absorbent. So as I'm painting this on, and I should have dipped it or sprayed it or something, but I really don't have the tools or facility for that, but as I was painting it on, it just turned into mush, and everywhere you'd brush, it would just pull up all of the paint you'd just brushed down and reveal bright green, dry foam underneath. So, well, it was a nightmare. What ought to have taken maybe an hour and a half tops ended up taking the entire day, and that meant we couldn't play the game Monday, which is my day off. And then Tuesday I had to work, and today's Wednesday when I'm recording this, and I have to work today, so I'm doing this on my lunch hour. So I couldn't be home to play the game with them, and we're not going to be able to play till this weekend now, blah, 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 blah. The net result is, I got nothing. But, in the meantime, someone asked me a question. Someone asked me how I go about world building, and specifically, how do I plug a random encounter into my world in a way that ends up feeling organic, it doesn't disrupt things, and just so kind of easily flows into it. So I thought I would address some of that in a larger question of world building. At first I thought I don't have a method of world building, I just sort of do it. But then I looked at what I do and I realized I do have some principles. And so I present to you the Dungeon Minister's 5 Rules of World Building. Rule number 1. Decide what you care about. Really, decide what you care about. Because no world that you invent is going to be completely and totally 360 degrees, at every depth, at every level of magnification, complete and thorough. Even J.R.R. Tolkien's world had massive gaps and holes in it. See also George R.R. Martin's question about Aragorn's tax policy. And I can't say that George R.R. Martin's world was any more complete than Tolkien's. In fact, kind of thin, that Westeros. At any rate, though, decide what level your group is playing on, what's important to them and to you, and what they're gonna need to know, and what you will need to know. Who is in power? Where do the bad guys live? Where is their help? Broad strokes. Broad strokes. Right now you are just blocking it in, like painting a miniature, right? You're just blocking it in. You'll get to the details later. Broad strokes to begin with. You'll save the details for beginning in Rule number 2. Build the world from the point of view of your characters. It's going to be presented to them. I mean, it's your world, you're creating it, but they're the audience. And you're going to present this world to them, either overtly or subtly, through some background details that they may or may not always pick up on, but will eventually lead them to a larger world. But do it from the player's perspective. So, start with their hometown. Start with their hometown, establish, how many people approximately are there. Maybe draw a map of the hometown if you want to. You don't have to start with. Decide who's in charge. Is it a mayor? Is it a reeve? Is it some sort of commune? Decide that big level stuff. And then maybe one adventure nearby. A set of caves, a ruined tower, something like that. Just enough to get them started. Then, as they adventure, follow their lead. Do they go to the ruined tower? Do they start to ask questions about whose tower it was? Follow their lead. Decide, this wizard who lived here decades ago, centuries ago even, but the sect of wizarding that he founded is still around, and some of his followers, although scattered and not very powerful, they are beginning to gather and they want to take the tower back. I mean, that's 17 adventures down the road, right? But use that initial curiosity and feed on it. Do they ask, is there an herbalist in town? Because, your first adventure, maybe you had them fight some were-rats or something. Is there an herbalist in town? Because we could really use some help with lycanthropes. Well, yes, there is an herbalist in town. Or, no, there isn't, but there is one in the next village over. You have to go through the werewolf woods to get there. Right? Use their questions as guidance for your next adventure and to start painting in those details. Starting small like that begins the adventure where they are. First level, beginning adventurers, they've got no experience, they're heading out into the world for the first time. A small town, incidentally, is better because it inspires them to leave to go seek adventure, right? I mean, people who grew up in a small town, we know you want to get out of there. You want to get out and see the world, right? So start with something small, which is just big enough to support them, but not big enough to satisfy them, so that they want to seek adventure elsewhere. And then follow their lead and use that to paint in details. Begin to lay in some details. Maybe their actions attract the attention of the local lord, so now you can decide who that is. Are you in a barony, a county, a duchy? Are you subjects of a thane, of a local warlord? Is there a sorcerer priest who oversees this area? Maybe it's in a clerical domain, it's a theocracy. Now, if all of this seems to be building up complexity, which I said at first not to worry about, it is. At first you want to start simple, but then you get to Rule number 3. Don't fear complexity. And this goes right to the heart of the question about random encounters. So, my characters are going down a wooded path. They're walking through the forest, and I roll for random encounters, like you do, and something comes up. Okay, well, what kind of encounter is it going to be? Oh, it's going to be with a centaur. It's going to be a band of centaurs, and this area of the woods is patrolled by them. This is their territory, their kingdom, and they watch the road closely. And when they see anyone as well armed as this group, and they're not escorting merchants, keeping goods safe on the road, they're going to ask questions. Boom! Okay, you've added something to your world. All right, so there's a centaur tribe there now, right? Maybe you roll up some kobolds. Great, there's a horde of kobolds in the forest. Nobody knew they were hiding out there, right? But maybe their food supply, the reason they've suddenly shown up is their food supply has been threatened. And so now they're looking for other ways to get food. So they're attacking merchants. They're attacking their caravans carrying food and stealing all that so they have something to eat, etc. You've got all sorts of possibilities there, right? Maybe you roll up a dryad. Okay, it's not just an ordinary forest. This forest is filled with magical beings. There's dryads and sprites and pixies and things, right? You can go into all sorts of fun with this stuff. You take that little thing. So, centaurs, who might hang around with a centaur? Well, maybe there's a satyr. Maybe there's some fauns in this forest as well. Maybe there's a tribe of halflings who have befriended the centaurs, and the centaurs don't mind them. I kind of took the centaurs being distrustful. I took that right out of Harry Potter. But maybe the centaurs like the halflings because, well, they're small and they're kind of harmless, and well, not Touchberry isn't, but other ones are, and they're friendly with them. So maybe there's some wild halflings, a halfling tribe no one's ever seen before, right? They're wildling halflings. All sorts of fun stuff, right? So use the random thing for those places that you don't have any idea. Just let whatever random encounter you run into, boom, that's what's there. That's who lives there. And again, as I said, don't fear complexity, just roll with it. The real world is insanely complicated. Layer upon layer of history. There are alliances and treaties, some of them at cross purposes with each other. There are betrayals, there are conspiracies, right? Economies are delicate and fragile things and they can come crashing down. All of this, as you allow some complexity to creep in, as you allow it to develop, and you don't worry about the consequences, right? Because the real world doesn't worry about the consequences. The consequences just happen, right? So-and-so invades another country. All they want is to invade this country. They've got a goal. They have an objective. They're after it. It's going to cause, butterfly effect, right? It's going to cause huge ripples. Well, story gold, right? That's all story gold. So that ruined tower, here come those disciples of that ancient magician and they're going to reclaim the tower. Well, what's that going to do? Is that going to upset the local lord? Is the local lord, maybe it's not an adult. Maybe this is a lordling. Maybe his father died and when he was 12 and he's taken over as this child. So a child ruler, well, that's always an invitation for someone to come and manipulate, right? So maybe there's an uncle, maybe there's a guardian who's actually the power behind the power and who's controlling things. And what does the king or queen or emperor or empress or whoever's on the top of the society, what do they think about this? All right? After you've gotten a few adventures in and you've established some of the small scale stuff, you can start moving out and say, okay, what is this place part of, right? What is this little town? Where is it set? What kind of larger unit is it built in? And this is probably when you start to expand your map, right? I do advise making a map at the very beginning of the immediate vicinity. This is your broad strokes early stage, an immediate vicinity map. But here you're expanding it and deciding who's next door and where they are. I'll get to maps later after we finish the rules, but don't fear complexity. Right? Including complexity in time, which brings us to the fourth rule. Rule number 4. Time is your friend. Time is your friend. It is one of the greatest tools that you as a DM have. Okay, what do I mean? Say that you're really keen on making a temple to a snake god, right? You've got this great idea for a snake temple and this ancient evil in there. But your current religion is more Norse in character, right? It's not anything to do with snakes, and you've already established in a previous adventure that in this area, historically, the people were sun worshippers, say, right? Nothing to do with snakes. How are you going to work the snakes in there? Well, you could have them go to another land, that's true. But you also have time as a dimension to work with. Just go further back in time, or somewhere later, maybe as the sun worship died out, this snake cult cropped up for, maybe a century, maybe just a few decades, but it was popular and then it was stamped out by the new religion which came in or was discovered or whatever, right? Or maybe it existed at the same time as the sun worship, but it was in conflict with it, right? Or one came after the other and the next one, is the one that destroyed the previous. So maybe your snake temple has signs of defacing, statues that are broken and things scrawled on the walls, Sol Invictus, right? That indicate that a later religion came and stamped out this old one. Then, just to be sneaky, you could reintroduce this snake cult. In the contemporary timeline, maybe some of the people in your player's world, in your player character's world, maybe they've rediscovered this ancient religion, the way neo-paganism, brought paganism back after centuries. Or maybe it's always been there, hidden underground. Maybe the snake cult wasn't destroyed. Maybe they just got real quiet, and they've been quietly practicing it. Maybe they're an evil cult of human sacrificing snake worshippers who are wanting to overthrow the current religion, the current lord. Or maybe they are peaceful. Maybe they are oppressed. Maybe they just want their own practices and they want to carve out their own place, right? Either of those, story gold. You've got all sorts of potential threads to pull on there. Use time. Use time to your advantage. You've got everything behind, and who knows what's back there, right? It's like going through your attic. Who knows what's up there?
Rule number 5.
Power corrupts. You have, by this point, established who the major players are in your world, right? Your players started off local and small, and they began to branch out, and from their point of view, you expanded the world for them. You laid out the next bit as they were approaching it. You prepared the stage ahead of them, like Potemkin's village, right? You got the next village ready as they approached it. And now you've built this thing, keeping in mind that the complexity is okay. It doesn't have to all harmonize perfectly, because the real world doesn't harmonize perfectly. You can lay it out as it goes. So you've gotten big enough, you know who the local lord is, you know who's above him or her, you know the ultimate power in your area, and maybe you even have a sense of who some of the neighbors are. You know where the demi-human kingdoms are at, and what their relationships are like with the humans and with each other. You've sorted all that out. Now, what does that power dynamic do to the hearts and minds of the people in power? What plan does this lord have? What plan does he have to attack the Empress? What plan does the Empress have to put down the Count, to put down this Duke or this Duchess? What do the demi-humans want that they might be willing to negotiate with goblins to get? Where is there stress and strain in your world? Where can it all blow up and turn into chaos? Chaos is a ladder. That doesn't sound like him, does it? I mean, his accent is ridiculous and it's all over the place, but that was more Sean Connery. Sean Connery starting at Littlefinger. Chaos is a ladder. So, once your player characters have advanced to a level where they're not just, go to dungeon, kill monsters, take treasure, right? They're beyond that. They're beginning to attract the notice of lords and ladies of the land. They're beginning to be power brokers of their own. When they're at that level, blow the world up. Blow the world up. Let things just crumble. And then all of the little details you've been laying down, those centaurs in the forest, right? This group of wizards who wants to reclaim the tower, the snake cult, all of them become pieces on a chessboard for the local lords and ladies to begin moving around and using against each other. They all become players in this larger game, right? And it can have all sorts of potential for adventures, because as things fall apart, right, things which were hidden are exposed and opened, vulnerable, and it creates all sorts of cool places for adventure. So, again, starting from the first, rule number 1, broad strokes, simple at the beginning. Rule number 2, create from your player's point of view. Let their experience guide where you're going to go. Let their questions guide what you will create. Let their expectations shape what you will provide. Even if it shapes it by, undercutting it, let them shape it. 3, do not fear complexity. Complexity is your friend. It is fabulous. Do take notes, because it can get away from you after a while, but don't be afraid of complexity. 4, time is your friend. Use it. Use it to compress, to expand, to open spaces for things to have happened that don't fit in any other way. And 5, remember that power corrupts, and corruption creates chaos, and chaos is a ladder, Moneypenny.
Miscellaneous.
Now some things that don't really go in the place of a rule, that aren't really rules, but can be really important. The first one being maps. Maps are key, I think. A lot of us design our world starting with a map. partly because every fantasy novel you've ever read has a map, and inside the front cover, right? And as you read, you keep flipping back to it. Where are we going now? Oh, okay, that's where that is. All right, So maps can be a real good place to start, and a neat way to do this would be to start by drawing a map of the natural geography, right? Just the mountains, rivers, forests, deserts, all that stuff. No settlements, no intelligent life whatsoever, nothing like that, just the natural geography, and then approach it as early settlers would have. Well, if I was leading a tribe into this area, where would I build my camp? Well, I'd build it by some water. So here's a river. That's where there would be a settlement. Time is my friend. How did that settlement develop? Right, is this going to be a big city or is it going to be a small outpost? Well, this is pretty far north, short growing season, can't really produce a lot of food up here. Okay, this is going to be a small outpost. Further south, oh, here we go, there's a delta. That's a great place for a city. We'll put a city there, right? So start with the natural geography. And maybe you design it just, there's a river, there's the mountains, right? Doesn't matter. You do sort of want to follow some rules of the real world. No, you don't. It's a fantasy world. You know what? Put your mountains wherever you want to. Let your rivers flow uphill. Who cares? It's a game. Anyway, once you've done it, though, look at it and say, well, where would things happen in this world? And if you can't see any way that this land you've created would be populated, ball it up, throw it out, start over. It's just a piece of paper, right? Now, the other way to design a map is more the way that I approach it, which is, what do you need or what do you want? So when we started, I had my three boys all rolled up elves originally. The eldest and the youngest have held on to their elf characters, Fleetwood and Bob Johnny. The middle guy has gone through a cleric and now on to Touchberry, the famous halfling. But they're all elves. This is before they roped my wife into playing. So I knew I needed the elven woods. And I wanted them to leave home to go adventuring, so they left the woods, so that they wouldn't have all this support right at their back, right? They'd be on their own. So they went into the human world. All right, they're going to be out in the human world. There wouldn't be a huge human city right next to the elven realm. That's just a little close for comfort. So it's a little village, Honeywood, and also I was following my first rule of starting small. So, okay, Honeywood. And then I knew there was going to be some caves. So I positioned those things, and that was it. That was it. And then I just expanded from there. I thought a long, narrow sea would be cool, basically because I saw a puddle in our church parking lot. And I put that there with some mountains on the north. And then for instance, when I got to the dwarves, I decided that I really thought would be cool be the dwarven kingdom being in a mountain in a cliff that opened onto a big lake, right? So that there would just be this narrow strip of land that led up to the gates around the lake, so that an opposing army, an attacking army, could never bring a huge force to bear. They'd be forced into a Thermopylae kind of situation, right? So that's how I designed it. I thought it would be cool, and I did it. I thought it would be cool to have a valley off of the main valley. The kingdom that we play in is a huge valley, the Valley of Strathunwyn. It's a big, wide valley. But I thought it would be neat to have a side valley where there was a local lord, maybe just a baron or something, right? Hence the Vale of the Blade, that was born, this little side kingdom. And I thought, well, a kingdom like that, all those mountains, harsh terrain, warriors, right? They're going to be the tough guys. Well, why are they so tough? I mean, living in a valley doesn't necessarily make you tough. Oh, what if the mountains to their east, maybe on the other side of that, is the orc kingdom? That's why they're so tough. They have to deal with these orcs all the time. All right. So I let the map shape the world, but I also let my ideas about the world shape the map. Starting with a map can be a really cool way to do it. And then, you draw your line, you draw your river, there's your roads, you put a lot of settlements, you connect them up with roads and whatnot, there's mountains here, forests there. And then you say, well, what could I do with this? Well, let's say this is the capital, and let's say that over there, that's a small little village, and you invent that way. Okay, so starting with a map is usually a pretty good way to go. History. History is a great resource. So if you've watched my campaign, you may know that when it began, at least, there were kobolds were the presenting problem. They were attacking travelers on the road more boldly than kobolds normally would.
Oh, great. The coward thing again. Yeah, you calling us cowards, are you?
No. I'm not calling you... Yes, I'm calling them cowards, but don't tell them. Anyway, it was the kobolds who were attacking. But the kobolds weren't doing that on their own. They were put up to it by the gnolls. Well, why were they this far south? Why were they just trouble now? Why had they not been trouble before? Because they've come south. They were pushed south by goblins. The goblins came south because they were pushed out by a dragon, right? And here what I was doing is I was just channeling European history as the Roman Empire saw wave after wave of Goths coming in from the east, pushed by the Huns behind them, right? You know, pushing and pushing and pushing, and a domino effect of peoples and tribes moving west. So that was just, I just used that general concept for what happened here. So use history. Find a large historical movement, something, you know, top scale, broad strokes, and try applying that. You know, if you're looking for ideas and a way to set your world, try that out. So these are some of the ways that I do it. It's not the right way. It's not the only way. You know, I ignore things like taxes. Every once in a while, I'll tell the boys and my wife, you know, you knock off some gold pieces for your taxes. I don't go into it really deep. I don't really care about trade embargoes or tariffs. I'm not too terribly worried about social customs and things like that. I keep it pretty basic. But maybe that's your jam. Maybe you like all that stuff, right? Maybe you really want to know what the cuisine is in this village and how it's different from that village. Maybe that's what really grinds your gears. Go for it, right? Whatever it is, though, choose the things that you're going to care about and go for it. Again, rule number 1. So again, my way is not the only way by far. It's not even the best way or the coolest way or the most efficient way. It just happens to be the sort of unplanned plan that I follow when I create a world for Dungeons and Dragons, or really for any fantasy game. Oh, I forgot. There actually is another rule.
Rule number 6.
Have fun. This is a game, right? I mean, we put a lot of work into it. It becomes a second job, right? It is obsessive and it's demanding and there's lots of details that go into it, and it's a game. So have fun with it. If it's not fun, it's probably not going to be very fun to play either. So have fun doing it. Finally, if you have a tip or a trick or a tool that you always use when you're doing your world building for role-playing games, put it in the comments. I'd love to read it, and I'm betting some of the people who watch this will too. It's great to share ideas and to be inspired by other people, and I can't tell you how many ideas I've stolen. Borrowed from the comment sections of my videos. All right. What are you waiting for? Go design a world.